I don't know if somebody else can. There you go. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. I know that there are always some folks who join us a little bit in the beginning, so hopefully they can catch up. I want to welcome everyone and thank you for joining us for Livable Built Environment Part 2. We have, it looks like we had about 53 or so folks already attending. We have representatives here from the Planning Board, as well as various county agencies, including environmental protection, aging, and government reform and strategic initiatives. At least those are the ones I caught very quickly before I had to close my participants window down. So with that, I just want to introduce myself. I'm Amy Mante. I'm Deputy Director for the Department of Planning. And before we get started, I just introduced the Director for the Department of Planning, and I think he had a few things he wanted to say.
Thank you very much, Amy. And most importantly, thanks to all of you for joining us tonight. If you've joined us for the first time during this round 2 of our community engagement, we really look forward to your participation. And I know I see from the participants list, there are a number of people who have joined us previously, and we're always glad to have your perspective to help us shape what the master plan for 2030 should be. This is your plan, and I can only say that the staff has worked very, very hard to integrate the comments from the community into all of the work that we're doing. And I really appreciate Amy's leadership to bring us to this point. So once again, everybody, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll look forward to your participation tonight. Thanks, Amy.
Sure, thank you. All right, next slide. So welcome to the 4th of 7 input meetings we're holding in January and February. Tonight, we're going to give you a brief overview of the input we gathered during phase 1. And then we're going to present our draft goals for Livable Built Environment Part 2, which covers transportation, infrastructure, and public facilities. And then at the end, we'll ask for your input on those goals. Master Plan 2030 development is underway. Through the summer and fall of 2021, the Department of Planning conducted a series of community engagement meetings that were held in different communities throughout the county. The input that was gathered will guide the vision for the county over the next 10 years. We held 50 community engagement meetings. Over the course of those meetings, we engaged with over 1,000 citizens of Baltimore County and captured about 4,000 comments related to where people see their communities and the county evolving over the next 10 years. The meetings were held across all 7 council districts and engaged over 35 various community groups. We asked broad questions about what you valued most or wanted to see changed in your communities. And we also asked where you see the county in the next 10 years. From the input we gathered, the top 3 most discussed categories were land use, economic development, and transportation. And notably, the most engaged groups were located in the western part of the county: Catonsville, Randallstown, and Woodlawn. Also interesting to note, residents expressed the most support for walkability and pedestrian-oriented infrastructure, streetscape improvements, renovated schools and public facilities, green space and parks, redeveloping aging commercial corridors, senior housing and facilities, stormwater, small businesses and local businesses, and community engagement and participatory planning. And we heard the most concern about school overcrowding and inadequate facilities, traffic and congestion, overdevelopment, loss of green space, the continued threat of climate change, lack of professional and recreational opportunities for young people, and blight in older communities. Now, as we're moving to phase 2, we're doing work internally, not only to review everything that we heard from the community in the past few months, but also review existing conditions and emerging trends to determine the big ideas We're moving the county forward to where we want to be by 2030. At the heart of this process is the idea that local government should invest more and more thoughtfully in its people and infrastructure. Using what we heard in the summer and fall, we've developed draft goals for 6 master plan topics. The goals are grouped into 6 categories: livable built environment, resilient economy, interwoven equity, healthy communities, harmony with nature, and responsible regionalism. Each of these groups is led by a community planner with staff support from within the department. So very briefly, before we focus on livable built environment tonight, I want to provide an overview on all the input we gathered this summer and fall. So some of the things we heard this summer and fall about livable that fall into our category of livable built environment. We heard about the need for trash collection and recycling, code enforcement, ADA compliance, maintenance of public facilities, a need for affordable senior housing throughout the county and a wide variety of housing types. There was a strong emphasis on stormwater and sewer issues, road paving, and expanding high-speed internet in the rural areas. We also heard about concerns related to traffic and congestion, as well as suggestions for improvements to specific intersections and traffic corridors. And we also heard about land use, a need to reform the comprehensive zoning map process and enforce the urban-rural demarcation line. Also concerns about the need for more transparency in the development process, including updates to the plan unit development process and updates to zoning regulations. For resilient economy, we heard about commercial centers, the need to improve and diversify retail options, looking at retrofitting retail corridors to make them less car-oriented or auto-centric, and look at new opportunities for redevelopment there. Adaptive reuse for vacant or obsolete properties, as well as possible new programs for grants for improvements. The county needing to be able to attract large-scale job creators in emerging industries without neglecting small and local businesses. The opportunity to support agritourism and workforce development that meets the needs for emerging industries in the future. For interwoven equity, we heard about the need to ensure fairness and equity in providing for housing, services, health, safety for all citizens and groups, expanding public venues for arts and culture, performance and gathering spaces, cohesion and engagement, providing an opportunity for residents to really know what's going on in their community from the county, and for their input back to the county be taken into account. The need for more public-private partnerships between local institutions and community groups, and I guess a more accessible internet presence on the part of the county, so folks can feel like they can have a better or more user-friendly way of getting information about development or projects in their community, and things that are going on in the county. And historic preservation, to look at the county's heritage while looking at all groups within the county to make sure that all the diversity here is represented. For healthy community, we heard about public health issues related to senior citizens and young people, specifically so that seniors were able to live in places that were walkable and accessible and could age in place, as well as recreation opportunities for younger folks as well. Public safety, a lot of the comments we received about public safety were very focused on the communities that we spoke to. They weren't broad county issues. So we heard a lot about less crime in their area, or the need for more public safety or communication, pedestrian safety in certain spots in their neighborhood, police presence, and those types of things. Harmony with nature. We heard a lot about Baltimore County's waterfront and how the shoreline could be publicly accessible and safe from flooding and erosion. Reforestation, tree preservation, and tree canopy were also very hot topics. The plan for impacts to infrastructure, health, and environment in response to climate change, as I mentioned earlier, was one of our top concerns that we heard. And for recreation parks and open space, there was an overwhelming sentiment that there's a desire for improvements to the quantity and quality of parks in the county. as well as an overarching desire for all those parks and spaces to have walkability, bikeability, parks, ball fields, greenways, conservation easements, all these elements to have as many connections to nature as possible. And for regionalism, we heard about the interconnectedness of nearby communities, not just within the county, but also neighboring jurisdictions from the city to other counties. There was, of course, concern about, maybe some of the failures in Baltimore City and the perception that maybe how that impacts the county and how we can address those to work together to look for solutions. So as I mentioned earlier, tonight is the 4th of 7 meetings where we're asking for your input on our draft goals and for your help in the development of actions to implement those goals. At this point, I'll turn the meeting over to Laurie Hay, who is the staff lead for the Livable Built Environment Work Group.
Thank you, Amy. Good evening, everyone. My name is Laurie Hay, and I'm heading up the Livable Built Environment Work Group. Because the topic is so broad, as we said previously, we've split it into 2 sessions. Tonight, we'll be discussing transportation, infrastructure, and public facilities. Last week, we discussed land use and development and housing, and we got some very good input from that session. We will discuss draft goals and actions developed by the staff and solicit your input on these goals in a small group exercise. We will then come back and report out to the entire group. So the draft goals for part 2 of the Livable Built Environment deal with transportation. The goal is to create a multimodal transportation system that promotes connectivity between places and functions and spearheads positive economic development and community growth. Our goal for infrastructure is to align infrastructure investments with growth and redevelopment efforts utilizing green technology and sustainable building practices. And finally, for public facilities, our goal is to develop facilities to meet the community's needs for education, recreation, and safety that are inviting, accessible, adaptable, and constructed using contemporary, sustainable green building practices. So tonight you've been assigned to a WebEx, or you will be assigned to a WebEx breakout group. Each room will discuss the same topics and then report back to the whole group. The room will be managed by a planner who will act as your facilitator and will ask questions and record details of the discussion. When the session is over, you will get a notice and everyone will automatically be moved back to the main meeting room where we will hear what everyone discussed. As we break out into these groups, sometimes people may lose audio as the break is taking place. So if you see this, when you enter or leave a breakout room, click the connect audio to reconnect to your computer's audio. Okay, we're going to have Jennifer Meacham break us out into groups now and start our discussion.
Okay, give me 1 second to put some more people in groups and I'll be right, and I'll start the groups in 1 second.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to start the breakout sessions. Some people will remain in the lobby and other people will be moved to the breakout session rooms. We'll have an hour to go over all 3 goals, so about 20 minutes per goal. Okay, Laurie, I think everybody's gone to their group. I think that who you have in the lobby is now in your group.
Okay, great. So Crystal is going to help us record this evening. So thank you for joining us this evening. This is part 2 of the Livable Built Environment. Will include goals and actions on transportation, infrastructure, and public facilities. Tonight, we will review draft goals and actions for transportation, infrastructure, and public facilities. As we review them, we ask you to think about the following. Do you generally agree with the direction of the goal? Do you generally agree with the direction of the actions? What additional actions should be added? The draft goals and actions that were developed by planning staff through input process provided in phase 1 of the community engagement process. Input from other county agencies, best practices, and reviewing the recent work of other jurisdictions. The list that you'll see tonight is not by any means inclusive or exhaustive. The action examples here are listed to get you thinking about the general direction that we are going. As you participate, please remember that this part of the community engagement, we'd like you to be thinking county-wide about these goals and actions. As Jennifer stated, we have about an hour for this exercise, so we'll spend 15 to 20 minutes on each section. I'm going to go through and read the goal and action for the transportation section. And then if folks can identify the actions by number as we go back, it'll make it easier for Crystal, who is helping us with recording. So I'll go through the entire section first, and then we'll come back and start to get some input. So the goal is to create a multimodal transportation system that promotes connectivity between places, functions, and spearheads positive economic development and community growth. The first action is to expand bicycle access and use in all communities and include in community plans. The second one is to eliminate parking minimums and establish maximums to encourage alternative transportation and to reduce impervious surfaces. Action 3 is to establish a safe walk to school initiative using an equity lens focused on routes to elementary and middle schools. Action 4 is to expand bus and shuttle service, including circulators on key routes to support employment, meet the needs of seniors, and connect residents to services. Action 5 is to implement a transit-oriented development strategy to increase connections between jobs, housing, entertainment, and retail through the use of transit services. Action 6 is to apply the complete streets approach to the evaluation of all development projects. And finally, action 7 is to increase the presence of EVs and electric vehicle charging stations on public and private property. So I guess I'd ask first if anyone would like to comment on the goal statement. Do you agree with it? Is it missing anything?
I guess we can just talk. You can hear me?
I can.
Okay. I guess I would also see just embedded in that goal that it is also an environmental goal. So I would want to see that somewhere listed in that statement.
Okay. Thank you. And we may actually have something to that effect in the Harmony with Nature section, because a lot of these have, crossover relationships, but definitely, thank you for that. Anyone else want to comment?
I was just going to say that I agree with it. I like the way that it's stated and the additional piece as well.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Lauren Esikoff. I think it sounds really good, but I did notice that, and I like this, that I'm trying to find it now, that you talk about a lens that an equity lens, and I think that's a really important point that maybe belongs up top, so that it's an overarching part of the goal as opposed to connected with one of the initiatives.
Okay, good, thank you.
Sure.
And I agree
That
with
actually
that.
is an overriding theme throughout the entire plan. So you're right. Anyone else?
Hi, this is Jennifer. I think the full statement is fine. I don't necessarily want to add anything to it because I think the statement encompasses. But when we get to item 5, the transit-oriented development, if someone could expand on that, because what seems to be missing is something that's, you know, a lot of cities, modern cities have now, and that's a, you know, a more robust, transit system, public transit system. Beyond that, expands beyond buses. And so if someone, I guess when we get to item 5, if someone could expand on what that really means, and if it includes that, then fair. But of all the items missing, that seems to be, that's not really indicated here.
Okay, so we don't have to do this in any order, so we can talk about item 5 now. So if I understand you correctly, you would like to make sure that action specifies that you are not just talking about transit, but other types of.
Well, that we're not limiting public transportation to buses and shuttle services,
Okay.
though those need, that we need better efficiencies on both of those. But, you know, of all the East Coast major cities, Baltimore County, our ability to have transit system beyond just a light rail, one route subway system is, you know, it's a bit lacking.
Okay. Do you want to add any specific suggestions for other types of?
I mean, it would be that, you know, just expanding, and I know this is a bitter pill for Maryland and in the area, but, you know, expanding a light rail system and an updating a subway system that, you know, the technology can be modified to handle, you know, a network and things like that. But it would be upgrading our public light rail and subway system.
Okay, great. So Crystal, you have expansion there. If you could just put expansion and upgrade, that'd be, I think that covers.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Anyone else want to comment on action 5 or go back to the other actions and comment?
This is Nora Smith.
I wanted to add something. Hello, do you hear me? This is Diana. I wanted to add something that I don't hear too much discussion, and is regarding our homeless population in Baltimore County, and having infrastructure to reduce our homeless population in Baltimore County, especially our women and children. During COVID, we saw a lot of families lose their home due to the challenges of losing their jobs. And a lot of our families, the women and children, ended up in a lot of motels throughout the county. I think the county will benefit greatly by supporting families that have been displaced and lost their home if there was some kind of infrastructure in place to provide them transitional housing so they could get permanent, stable homes and be able to contribute back to the community that they've been part of.
Okay, it sounds probably like, unless you are specifying specifically that you want to have transit be more responsive to homeless individuals, that perhaps your statement would go better in the housing section, which we talked about last week. So we will certainly, I've made a note of it here, and we will certainly add that to that section. And then also when we start talking about general infrastructure, if you have anything to add to that section, which we're going to talk about next, please do. Thank you for that comment.
And as we talk about transportation, I think it's really helpful to, as we talk about expanding bike lanes and creating more interconnected trails, but also decreasing reliance on single occupancy vehicles and supporting a transition away from more vehicle-centric design. And part of that may be, there is a model called the 15-minute city model, and obviously being in the county wouldn't necessarily be as applicable, but ensuring that people have their basic needs met within a 15-minute bike ride, walk, or bus ride. So maybe adding in that framework, but also ensuring that we're promoting the use of these trails and bike lanes and encouraging behavior change as it relates to using transportation or public transit, because we can build the infrastructure, but if people don't use it, then we're not actually seeing the environmental impacts that we're aiming for.
Right. Yeah, that just shows you how much overlap there is between these sections and why they're all in the livable built environment section. Because I know we had the 15-minute city listed as an action in the land use section. So
okay. I apologize if I'm.
No, it's good. We can add that in here too. Maybe right under your statement, Crystal, just in parentheses, you could type 15-minute city.
This is Dorothy. I wanted to just say that I'm aware out in Westminster, there is a project that they're working on to have an autonomous vehicle transportation route between McDaniel College and the community college going through the city town of Westminster. So something like, and I think it's Prince George's County, there's, or maybe Montgomery County, there's an autonomous vehicle for, I forget where it is, but that could be, I know it's, futuristic and everything, but that could be something that could be part of working towards.
Okay. We'll add that as an additional action.
And if there is, or if there are programs that can, I know Maryland has like the Maryland Commuter Choice Program, but if employers can encourage more sustainable commutes for their employees, that could be really critical too.
Okay. Good.
This is Nora. I just I'm interested in seeing if Baltimore County could develop some sort of program to hook up people with supermarkets in some sort of an individual way. It is difficult with bus lines there. Baltimore County has 6 documented food deserts, so those would be difficult to get to if you don't have your own car, if you're certainly not able to walk there or bike there. And if you have to take multiple buses or wait and carry all of these supermarket bags back and forth from the store to your house, if there could be some sort of a ride program. I know that Baltimore City, I think, did that with Lyft, that they would hook up people. They were able to get subsidized rides for $2.50 or whatever. I don't know if that program is still in effect or if that would be something that Baltimore County could do, but there are people that would need assistance with this, and I think it would help the general health of the community to allow people to get to supermarkets when they don't have easy transportation with their own vehicles, and the bus routes are difficult, to get to the supermarket. This would increase equity and healthy living in general.
Yeah, I think we added that. I think that's a good idea. And I think it's something that is actually going on in a few communities now in the county. Crystal, if you could add that up to action 4, I think it really fits in there, and looking at expanding bus and shuttle service to support employment needs of seniors. And we will add in access to supermarkets and perhaps other shopping.
With just also the caveat, a small one about seniors and apps on their phones to call ride services. Again, this is a little detail, but I think that's difficult. You know, if it would be something Baltimore County would be able to do to make it really easy and not something that's dependent on everyone's being able to handle that type of you know, computer literacy or even phone literacy to order them.
Okay. Anyone else comment, have any additional actions or want to comment on some of the actions? Any comments on any of the first four, for instance? We haven't seen any.
This is Dorothy again. I just wanted to clarify for the autonomous, I didn't mean individual vehicle, but it is a shuttle, autonomous shuttle system. So yeah, so if you could change that, that would be great. So it's just hop on like a shuttle bus kind of.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Can you go up to number 3, where it says establish that safe walk? How are they going to do that? How are you going to do safe walks? And where's the safety in all these programs? I mean, we're looking at, you know, when you bring busing in and stuff like that, you also bring a bad element sometimes, which how are we setting up so that it doesn't become a broken system?
Well, I mean, the goal is to have children that are elementary and school age to be able to walk to school safely, usually as a group, and make sure that that can happen in communities that perhaps are a little more vulnerable and don't have the resources necessarily to put together such a group. So this would be something that the county would partner with the specific community on.
So what they would do is set up a community walk to school where everybody would line up and go to school together. Is that what you're looking at doing, or is that what that program is going to look like?
It could, yes. I know there's one in a community I used to live in where the kids actually, many of the children in the community walk to school, and they walk as a group with an adult who's, you know, guiding them and helping them. So that's how it works in some communities. I think it would, you know, probably depend on the specific community, but what we're trying to do is establish a group walking safe system for children, particularly young children.
I mean, when I was a kid, I walked to school. I mean, and it was a different.
And I would add to that one, safety could just be physical. Say, I mean, there's a lot of neighborhoods where kids don't even have sidewalks to walk on, and there's barely room between the, you know, the street and, you know, and where they need to go. And, you know, so even if it's, you know, safety can be embedded in sort of just getting from point A to point B. And of course there is the, you know, the element of, you know, nefarious individuals, sure. But again, safety can encompass just the physical setup of the walk itself.
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
I mean, we have enough trouble down here with busing. The bus would pick up at a stop that nobody lives at anymore, and you had a fight with Baltimore County in order to get them to change the bus stop. And you would put a kid walking up to a dead end street, black at night, because it's dark here when they're picking them up in the mornings, and they'd be standing, no sidewalks, no street lights, up in a wooded area. That's not safe. And it took a lot to get the county to even reroute the bus. And it's not to have them picked up in front of their house, but in order to get them where it was a safe spot on the street.
That's a great point. I mean, we can add that in. Definitely the bus stop locations should be evaluated for safety.
Yes.
And
updated, because what they'll say is, this is where the bus stopped the last 10 years. Well, that's fine when the kid lived at that address. But when you've got a street that's 35 homes long and it's back in a wooded area, especially down in the peninsulas, that's not a good move to put that kid standing out on the corner with nobody to watch and see what's going on.
Right.
Lauren, I
I
think
want to add, sorry, I wanted to add something.
You had somebody else right before you
Diane.
already speaking.
Oh,
Lauren, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that I think the gentleman, Jim, who was just talking, makes a really good point, and maybe safety is something else that belongs in the goal statement. Because the truth of the matter is there's a safety component almost in every one of these items. I mean, they all have to be done safely and with an eye towards equity, you know. So I think it might be good at the end of this to sort of go down the list and, you know, scrub it for things that are common elements to all and bring that up to the goal.
It's a good idea. Definitely safety should be added, yeah. Let's see, how about anything on 1 and 2? We heard the first goal, it's not listed first because it's the most important, but we heard, I would say, overwhelming interest from the first phase of community engagement to have bicycle access in most all of the communities. Wanted it improved or included.
So I wanted to add something.
Okay.
This is Diana again regarding safety and improving foot traffic. So a lot of our Baltimore County schools, especially our elementary, that tends to have a higher percentage of a walking population. Their parking lots are not like up to date, and it makes it very complicated during dismissal and you know, school hours drop off to have safe walking system. So there doesn't seem to be like a specific amount dedicated to improve the safety of children walking to and from school. And part of that is because they haven't updated the layout of their parking lots and the way you go into the school and out of the school.
Great.
So
thank you. That's a
way
good point
to,
for this section. And
that?
we can also use this, I think, in the when we get to the section on public facilities, we can talk about that particular point there also.
Are they going to increase bike lanes? If you're going to increase bike traffic, there are no markings down. I'm in Bully's quarters. There are no bike lanes down here. To have a kid to ride a bicycle down here on a 2-lane road, and it's narrow 2-lane roads, is not that good. I mean, now the 4-wheelers do it, they run right down the middle. But as far as a bicycle and you're talking to go to school, that's something, if you're going to increase the bike traffic there, you have to have bike lanes in order to get them there safely.
Okay. Can put that after number 1, Crystal.
Separated bike lanes would be kind of the goal. I understand, you know, a sign has been adequate in the past for share the road, and I don't want that to be adequate in 2030. If that's a goal or an action. If we're talking real bike infrastructure, I would love to see separated lanes or protection, make it safe enough for someone would let their kid ride a bicycle to school.
Yeah, okay. I think we can clarify that first goal by adding that comment. I mean, the first action.
And can that also be, I guess, somewhat related to number 3? I know 3 is a safe walk to school initiative, but a safe bike to school initiative, or something other than just being dropped off in a car, perhaps could work. You know, whether it's infrastructure that's separated lanes, of course, or places to securely lock up your bike at the school as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great point. You have to have some place to put that bike when you get there. Not when you come out. It's probably going to be gone.
Is traffic calming something that you would cover in the next goal, or?
No, I think that, I mean, there's some overlap into all of the other areas, but I think, no, it would be in.
So what I'm thinking about, you know, I just took a couple planners on a tour this morning. We just walked the Dundalk Main Street, and you know, there's a lot of pedestrian, or there've been multiple pedestrian deaths on Dundalk Avenue, and there's been a desire to sort of increase how visible and noticeable the crosswalks are, and there may be many other strategies that could be employed, but I think that whether it goes with safe routes to school, but it's also safe route to the grocery store for anybody, safe route anywhere. So whether that's, having the county explore murals on the street in crosswalks again, there were some issues with that with a federal directive under the previous administration against painting crosswalks, but then we've seen the county paint some of our crosswalks since then. So anyway, I'm sure there are multiple strategies, but there are different benefits from doing that beyond safety, but safety is one of them. Thanks.
Yeah, I think we can add that as an additional action to employ traffic calming. It works fine there, Crystal, and then just to kind of as a broad action for traffic calming initiatives.
Real quick, this is Jennifer. As we're talking about traffic calming, I think it needs to be reflective of the type of device. You don't have to put all this in there, but community input. Each community needs to have input on the type of traffic calming that they would want or is desired. Yeah. It's some of them are worth it and some of them aren't, and then also maintaining. We can build all these things, but a lot of these times, who's maintaining these, especially like the circles with a tree or whatever in the middle. A lot of times those things aren't being maintained. And so who's going to be responsible for that maintenance if we're putting some of these items in here?
Good point. Thank you.
I guess I was thinking specifically of painting crosswalks, something more in your face in terms of colors and things that will slow drivers down. But
yeah, I know there's a thing as you get closer to it, it's as if it's some sort of 3D effect that causes, but I would not know what the cost of that would be.
Okay.
Recently encountered raised crosswalks where it's almost like a speed hump for the width of the crosswalk, and the surface material is a different color, like a stone as opposed to the asphalt.
Mm-hmm.
That is a fabulous idea, especially in areas where they're sort of like the downtown area of a community. So I happen to live on Church Lane in Old Pikesville, and the library is at the end of the street. And you are taking your life in your hands to cross, east to west or west to east to get to the library across Route 140. And State Highway, because it is a state highway, intervened and removed all the left turn signals. So now everyone's making left turns anyway, because they can't get home without doing it. Otherwise you have to overshoot or undershoot your own community. And Reisterstown Road between Slade and Old Court is like a speedway. And I know there are initiatives underway to make that a more walkable, to fix sort of the downtown area, but the crosswalk issue is huge. I mean, you have a public library right there, which is a perfect example of where kids should be safely able to come in and out. And the traffic patterns are horrible.
Okay, thanks. So maybe we can add crosswalk alternatives, most especially around public buildings where there are a lot of pedestrian use.
Yeah, and I think the other point there is that where the county has to work with State Highway, a lot of these larger communities, I'm sure it's the case in Dundalk and Essex and some of the other Baltimore County neighborhoods, where some of these roads that seem to be sort of local county roads are not. They're state highway road. The roads are owned by the state, and so we're going to have to coordinate with them to make them more pedestrian friendly, and not just. They have this tendency to do studies and then they implement a broad sweeping change based on the number of accidents, but they don't necessarily always take into consideration how people live and walk and use that particular community.
Right. Good. Thank you. I think we're going to move on to the next section now, just so we have enough time to cover everything. If we have time left over and people have additional thoughts, we can come back to this section. So the next section is infrastructure. The goal is to align infrastructure investments with growth and redevelopment efforts utilizing green technology and sustainable building practices. Number one action is to establish a green infrastructure program to create resilience, to mitigate and address stormwater and flooding problems focused in lower income and more vulnerable communities. Number two is to erect low impact development standards for all new developments that include an assessment of the impacts of climate change for all new development. Number three is to continue to invest in new sources of renewable energy, exploring additional power purchase agreements, better known as a PPA, to provide community solar, particularly focused on low-income communities. Number four is to adopt policies to promote renewable energy production and conservation. Number five is to establish systems and policies to reduce the number of properties that use septic systems. And number six is to develop a multi-agency approach to update regulations and policies that address road standards, aging water and sewing infrastructure, and stormwater management to support sustainable development and redevelopment. Okay, well, I guess we'll start with the goal. Any comments on that?
Does it have to just apply to infrastructure investment?
We have two people talking at
Yeah,
once.
go ahead,
I'll
Diana.
get to you in a minute. The gentleman was speaking first. I'm sorry, you ask a question?
Sure. I was just asking, does this only apply to infrastructure invested by the county, or could this be, all development efforts and building practices? Like, could there be policies that affect things that the county isn't spending money on that private sectors perhaps building?
Yes is the answer to that, and that is probably would be with private development would be done, or something that would be looked at through the land use and development section. So we'll make a note of that, and I'll come back to your point. But we did in that section last week talk about how it made sense to align the infrastructure improvements with where redevelopment was happening, and how you would kind of sequence that based on the master plan and community plans. So I think we have that in that section.
Got it. Thank you.
I'm sorry, you want to go ahead?
So sorry, it's hard for me to hear because I don't know if it's a delay because I'm calling from my phone, so I can't see anything like if I was logged in. I want to add that I'm concerned that no one's addressed the homeless population in Baltimore County. In our Budas area, we often hear a lot of the community members sharing concerns about squatters. And then I know I've personally met a lot of families that have helped out during COVID to provide food to them because they didn't have transportation and they had lost their home and they were living in some of the motels in the area. We don't seem to have any plan or any mention regarding our homeless population in Baltimore County overall that's increasing. There seems to be no plan to address it, and I'm kind of concerned that if we don't dedicate some resources and attention to this, we're going to have a growing population that we've seen in a lot of your cities across the nation. So
yeah,
I feel like
the issue of homelessness is definitely being addressed in the housing section of the plan. So I will, if before the end of the session, if you leave me your name and your contact information, I will make sure that you get the recommendations that came out of the housing section of the plan, because that's where we're really dealing with the issue of homelessness.
But homelessness is not just a house.
No, I understand.
Community involved programs and infrastructure you have to have in addition to housing. So
okay.
If we're, and that's, it's not just providing a house other resources that these families will need. Like, we talk about community infrastructure for public use. Is there a place where people in the community, even if they don't have a home, they can contribute to like a community garden for food? Or they could have access to facilities where they could, have community laundry in place. So those infrastructures are not available throughout anywhere in Baltimore County to help these families that are part of our community be able to live and be successful and productive in Baltimore County.
Okay, thank you.
So,
Krista, you want to add those two things, those two issues down at the bottom as additional actions, community gardens for the homeless, and then also looking at infrastructure for a community laundry facility?
Or a lending closet. There's a lot of communities that will provide lending closets on the square footage space to have those type of things that they might need temporarily that they could lend and borrow.
Okay. Anyone else?
And that could be helpful for any family that have lost like their home due to a fire.
Okay. Does anyone else have any comments on any of the actions listed?
Just the first one.
First one.
The last part of it. We keep focusing always on low income and vulnerable communities. With the problem on this is the flooding and stormwater is not always in low income communities. It's still a county problem. And it seems like it's wide across the entire county. The amount of flooding that the streets aren't draining, which we're trying now to have people walk to schools, ride bicycles. If you can't get through the floodwaters and the waters from a heavy rain, it doesn't matter. And it seems like we're focusing on low income and more vulnerable communities. No, we should be focusing on all communities to make it safe, whether it's low income or not. It's not because you live in a non-low income community doesn't mean that your roads aren't flooding. I mean, especially when we're down on the waterfront, we flood pretty regular and it's a constant problem. I know earlier this year they had a meeting about flooding and it was all throughout Baltimore County, and there must have been 12 or 15 different communities having the same problems we're having with the stuff's not draining off the streets. So I think when we keep putting in low income and vulnerable communities, we're cutting out all of our people. It should be every community.
Okay.
Put it that, that people don't have money. It's not about people not having money. If the street's flooded, it doesn't matter if somebody's got money or doesn't have money. It's not getting fixed.
This is Dorothy. This is Dorothy. I agree with that as well, that flooding and stormwater problems are in, all communities, many communities. I know we're in the Towson area and there's flooding in several of the neighborhoods around here. So I agree with that statement. Thank you for adding that.
And the other part down there further where it talks about storage. We're trying to get out of septic tanks. It says reduce the number of properties using septic tanks. Before we start getting rid of people with septic, and I don't agree with septic tanks, don't get me wrong. I think there's places where they work fine if it's not a failing system. But down here, it was a lot of failing systems. The problem is, where's the stuff going? It's going to the city and they're pumping it right back into our rivers. So you're putting money into putting grinder pumps throughout our community, which causes electric and everything else, and then there's an outage and you have a problem. But once you pump it out of here and it goes over to Back River, that plant 4 weeks last year pumped raw sewage right back into the Chesapeake Bay. So I would much rather see somebody have it in a holding tank in a septic system than pumping it into our rivers. I think we're addressing one part of it, but it's not just grinder pumps causing the problems. I'm just saying the amount of storage, if you're gravity fed or grinder pump, that's going over to the storage facilities, and then you have more buildings being built, and that storage is going there. You can't, the capability of handling how much storage is being dumped and not into there and not being redone correctly, and then dump that back in our rivers is tremendous. It was hundreds of thousands of gallons of raw storage went in the back river alone. And also they did it on the Patapsco. And people swimming out there, that's a health issue. So if we're going to worry about a septic system, I think we're worrying about the wrong thing. First, you got to fix the where it's going to go if it's not going in the ground in a septic system.
Okay, good. So I think we need maybe also to add under 5, just to, look at a broader system, a system that addresses the broader problem.
Right. The grinder pumps aren't the problem, because it's saying causing the problem. The grinder pumps are not causing the problem. The problem is, where is our storage going? So if you take it off of a septic system and however it gets there, gravity fed or grinder pump, it's just a way of getting it to the storage plant. If that storage plant can't handle what's going there, it's going to get dumped overboard. And septic systems aren't dumping it directly into the bay like they did down at Back River and on the Patapsco.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
I'd like to say that in the overall goal, there needs to be acknowledgement that climate change is challenging a lot of our infrastructure, and there needs to be a response both to mitigating it and adapting to it. We're having more frequent storms and more intense storms, which is contributing to a lot of these problems, even the sewage issues. Because of the amount of stormwater that gets into our sewer systems.
Good, thank you.
And, clearly if all of this relates to climate change, the renewable energy and all these topics, it just seems like it should be included in this goal.
Yeah, okay, maybe down the bottom, Crystal, too, just a note that all of the actions seem to relate to climate change, and it needs to be included as part of the broad concept of the goal. All righty. Anyone else have anything to add to any of the goals, or to any of the actions or to the goal itself?
This is Jennifer. You can add this to it can be a goal or a note, but I think anything involving infrastructure, and however y'all want to write it, there needs to be some sort of development of like apprenticeship or, some sort of program where young people can either, do internships, do apprenticeships and things of that. There's still a big gap between what we need whether it's climate change, infrastructure, all these other things, and the education of people doing those jobs. And so we're going to have to bridge that gap if we want to see the dynamic. If we're trying to address climate change today, we should have trained people, 30, 40 years ago to prepare for that. And so we need to start building in programs that create some sort of, like I said, apprenticeship or internships to get people involved in this particular topic, especially as it relates to infrastructure.
Yeah, this is Nora again. I definitely agree with what you're saying, Jennifer, that we need some sort of a conservation corps or something that also to give young people employment and training and internships, as you're saying, work in community gardens. I think that would be really important and really useful to have some sort of a partnership with the Baltimore County schools, with the high schools, and not just with their service projects, but with their during the school year with science classes, to actually be working on ecology projects and community education and things like that, and then to expand it over the summer. And then after they graduate, I think that would be really wonderful and a model for other communities. And also in terms of infrastructure, if we if Baltimore County is going to be working on permeable materials for sidewalks and streets instead of the impermeable ones. I don't know how expensive that is to replace things, but if there's any research going on with that, and also, of course, planting more trees, which could help so many things, and also be involved with our conservation corps with planting urban tree cover.
Okay, so we have expanding the county tree canopy, and then I also heard creating or replacing sidewalks with permeable surfaces.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
This is Michael
Recap some of
McAuliffe
your-
here.
I'm sorry?
My name is Michael McAuliffe.
Mhm.
Yeah, I live in Hillthorpe, 21227, Southwest Baltimore County. I'm the president of Hillthorpe Improvement Association. And we live in an older neighborhood that is density residential 5.5. And we have a new development that's proposed in our neighborhood that's a townhouse development. And I think that the townhouse developments should probably be put on a halt in these DR 5.5 zones until we can get the infrastructure up to a point that can handle the new amount of sewage that's produced by these houses, these number of houses. Right now, they are not allowed, townhouse developments are not allowed in DR 5.5 zones unless the hearing officer deems them compatible with the existing neighborhood. So I think that might be a point to lessen the density in some of these neighborhoods and the stress put on the sewage systems.
Okay, that's a good point. We can add that as number 10 then. Oh, we got some more as number 12. So decrease or put a hold on the type of more dense development in the DR 5.5 until the infrastructure can catch up with it.
Correct. That's correct.
Okay.
I wanted to add something. This is Diana.
Okay.
I wanted to see if we could add a review of policy and regulations to see what our standards are when it comes to our waste management system requirement for the county. Sometimes in the past we've seen that we don't have any standards set. That was one of the things that I had noticed regarding our drinking lead water levels for our public schools. And they created a standard that they wouldn't let the lead be a certain level. So maybe we have to create some policies if they're not in place regarding our waste management system when it comes to sewer and water for the county as a whole.
Great, thank you. All right, I'm gonna have us move on now to public facilities, just so we can get through. And then again, if we have leftover time, we'll come back. So the goal for this section is to develop facilities to meet the community's needs for education, recreation, and safety that are inviting, accessible, and adaptable, and constructed using contemporary sustainable green building practices. The first action is to ensure an open and transparent community input process for development and revitalization of community facilities. Apply an equity lens to develop a service area analysis tool for evaluation of community facilities in order to enhance accessibility for residents and increase levels of service as population changes. Number 3 is new county facility construction should meet LEED Silver standards and incorporate smart technologies and innovative elements. Property management should review the standards every 3 years. Number 4 is to incorporate virtual technology and remote work education elements into all county facilities. Number 5 is to adaptively reuse underutilized community land near community facilities that can be used for more productive uses such as recreation and parks. Number 6 is to consider equity in the location of new county facilities as well as the maintenance of existing facilities. Number 7 is to distribute capital funding equitably using a transparent methodology to serve the most citizens given a limited budget. And number 8 is to build facilities which can more cost effectively serve multiple uses when appropriate, whether they be quiet or loud, youth or elderly, indoor or outdoor. So we will start with the goal again. People have comments on the goal?
I have a comment which maybe see how investments in these community facilities could leverage other sorts of revitalization impacts or overlap with investments being made around transit or around housing. Just use these as to leverage other kinds of impacts, which is sort of implied by some of what's here, but I don't know. A specific building on a specific site may possibly sort of meet a lot of these actions, but somehow, if it was 2,000 feet moved over to a different location, might be able to have a much bigger impact on stuff that's already there.
So, Crystal, to leverage other development or investment.
I want to add something that the county seeks dedicated grant writers to seek federal grants that are available to improve telecommunications. They're available to improve communications like 5G, internet speed for the whole area. A lot of our older communities, they don't have the infrastructure in place to support a lot of updated technology for communication purposes. And there is grant money available at the federal level to dedicate to development projects.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we could just add federal level in parentheses there, Crystal. Any other comments on the goal or any specific action? Somebody just put something in the chat, but I didn't see it basically. Went way too fast.
Jennifer, I just added, in general, we just need to have some sort of, in any building or facility that's built, there needs to be some sort of like maintenance and sustainability agreement. Whether it's every 10 years, 50, the dates can be decided, whatever's realistic. And then, after so many years, if a community has not utilized the building for the purpose it was built for, the county needs to make a decision on what to do with it. I mean, this being okay with abandoned buildings is fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we included a piece both in the goal and in the actions that these buildings be able to be adaptively reused. Because a lot of times, the population changes or the types of programs that can be offered there change. So I think that's backed up in our goal statement.
That's fine. Sure. Thank you.
I have a question. Does the county have like a procedure in place to help identify county-owned facilities that are not in use to see how we could repurpose some of those facilities?
We definitely have an inventory of all the facilities, and yes, I'm sure that our property management section knows to what extent they are used and for what.
Hi, this is Will. I had to call in because I was having problems with my computer doing audio. I wanted to comment, excuse me, on the number 8 one, which is build facilities which can be more cost effectively to serve multiple uses. Well, it's nice to do things new, but unfortunately, we have a lot of county buildings that the community is not welcome in. We have current senior centers that community groups can't get into, have meetings and events to go through the process. It's ridiculous to do that. So we already have buildings in place that the community can't use, and now we're talking about building more buildings that the community can use. We can't even use the ones that we currently have. If you've tried to schedule meetings in the school, it's all at the principal's discretion. You can get a principal that doesn't want to support anything and doesn't want to do it, and they can shut everything down. So we have a lot of county buildings that have available uses at alternate times when they're not being used for their primary focus, and we can't get into them.
So would you say generally you can't get into them from a programmatic standpoint? It's not that they're not accessible for people to get in with maybe disabilities or something like that, but it's more because you can't get them scheduled?
Right, to schedule and to set some things up.
Okay.
I know, senior centers close at 4 o'clock. If this was a non-COVID world, they don't have any after-hours activities, and their buildings are completely shut down to the community.
Okay. There is going to be a whole section in the healthy communities part of the plan that deals with kind of programming for public facilities. This particular section deals primarily with kind of the hard buildings themselves, how they're built, how they're outfitted.
Well, yeah, I say that in that same relation is the senior centers and schools they're built in a way that they can be used for other things. Most of your senior centers are old schools turned over, so they have a gym and they have a cafeteria, so they already have the existing ability to do that, and we're not capitalizing on it. So when we say to focus on that, to me, it's not important to tell me to do something in the future if we're not doing it right now and we currently have the capacity to.
Okay. Crystal, could you, right after seniors in school, could you just put a note that this also deals with the healthy communities work group? So I remember to pass that on. Thank you, sir. Anyone else want to comment on any other part of the goal or action?
So does this part, oh, sorry. I think somebody's talking.
I was just going to say, I'm not quite sure I followed that. It's below I can't see, but there was something about maintenance and sustainability agreements. I guess it made me think about deferred maintenance becomes a real problem in Baltimore County, where buildings are not maintained and then they fall into disrepair and need to be replaced, rather than having a consistent maintenance program for all county buildings. So I wanted to mention that. And then
are you talking about would I be correct if we worded like consistent maintenance program to avoid demolition of these sites? Okay.
Yeah. I'm thinking, the example I'm thinking of is a building like Delaney Valley High School that, is not, it's not an ancient building, but it is in terrible condition where it needs to be replaced.
Okay. So yeah, Crystal, so we could add regular maintenance could defer replacement and prevent demolition.
I wanted to add something very specific regarding maintenance of county buildings, and I'm not saying like our school buildings, but our actual county office buildings. If we could have a standard to evaluate all their drinking water in all those buildings. A lot of the plumbing is very outdated and it hasn't been checked for the level of lead in those pipes. And also the air quality of those county buildings that county employees work in. There is no way to check those buildings, and we don't really have standards. I know that was something that we targeted regarding the schools because we knew we had no standards for lead and air quality for our public schools. But I remember receiving photos from county buildings, from county employees, and when you turn the faucet on in the bathroom for them to wash their hands, the water came out yellow, just like it did
Thanks
at
so
landfill.
much. Thanks. I think we were able to get your whole thought in. We're going to go back into the main section now so that we can report out. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, I think we're going to start with Amy for the report out.
Let me share my screen here. All right, let me enlarge it a little bit. Hopefully everyone can see that. Okay, so I believe I had about 6 people, maybe 7 in my group. And we went over we made it through all 3 goals and all of their actions. So for transportation, where we talked about creating a multimodal transportation system with connectivity between places and functions. Some additional thoughts and ideas that they provided were the need for greater maintenance along major arterial roads and not just in older communities. Oh, also in older communities. I felt like that part was left off. Sorry. Greater maintenance of sidewalks in older communities. Specific to number 4, to improve and maintain existing shuttle and bus services, not just focus on new. The need to address safety issues on streets at intersections and speeding. Better pedestrian access to schools is needed. Better access to the MARC train station in Hillthorpe for bikes. There's a need for traffic calming there. There's a dangerous route getting to the station. And a desire for there to be a design for the street to control the speed and not the other way around. Look at the need for on-street bike lanes in communities with seniors in order to keep bikes off sidewalks where seniors may be. The TOD at Aviation Station boundary, there was some discussion about the possibility of expanding that boundary to include a crossroads at 43 and or the Lockheed Martin property to provide additional connections to surrounding residential. For number 2, include elements for protection of existing trees where there's new parking lots, or the addition of trees or tree islands in new parking lots. Look at a new program for traffic calming in communities to review the existing requirements for traffic calming requirements. For infrastructure, align infrastructure investments with growth and redevelopment using green technology and sustainable building practices. The group's comments were encourage higher density development and redevelopment and determine where this should happen. It shouldn't be a county-wide policy. There were concerns about very high density residential projects. There should be projects with more mixed uses. Add an action with a focus on infrastructure investments in existing communities, not just new or redeveloped areas. Add an action to address sewer spills and waterways. Establish an infrastructure task force to go along with the efforts in number 6. Conduct an inventory of troubled, failing intersections and develop a plan to address those. Create uniform countywide development guidelines that would be used alongside and to reflect the goals and actions of Master Plan 2030. An increased role for the Department of Planning in developing guidelines and providing input on infrastructure improvement plans in the county. Better coordination between the county and state in the identification of wetlands, especially in review of new development plans. Related to number 3 and 4, other jurisdictions provide job training for installation of solar panels, and that's a program that the county could look into. to support those goals or those actions. The need for industrial base and job training needs should be encouraged within the county to support sustainable development efforts. Requirement for higher standard solar panel construction and materials. And there were concerns about the disposal of solar panels once they've outlived their life. Equal attention should be given to pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure as to what is given to the infrastructure for automobiles. And for the last one, community facilities, developing facilities to meet the community's needs for education, recreation, and safety. The comments that we had were there needs to be an evaluation of police, fire, and emergency services, and to determine if it's appropriate related to growth in the service area. And the same evaluation should be done for schools. A focus on Baltimore County libraries, investment as community centers, senior centers, and resource centers for all residents, with a focus on technology, continued renovation for all branches in the system, identify parkland, potential parkland throughout the county, and provide the county the first right of refusal. Community benefit from planned unit development. There should be some revisions to what community benefits could be. Create a greater support system for community associations by making facilities that are easier for them to use and are more open to them. Create ability to invest in additional park creation around reservoirs where there's overlap between the city and the county. Lack of accessible recreation facilities seem to exist for both youth and seniors, which is something that we've obviously heard before, as I mentioned in the opening presentation. Expand opportunities for playing pickleball indoors. Develop larger county-owned sports facilities. And increase transportation connections between senior centers and libraries, as well as other destinations providing services such as food distribution. Also address transportation for seniors with disabilities and the concerns there are about long waits between stops and pickups. And that is all from my.
Ganae, did you want to report?
Yeah, sure. Let me share my screen. All right, so we had a great discussion in my group. Thanks to everybody who joined in the discussion. So transportation for the goal, everybody generally agree with all the goals and all the actions. Goal number 1 under transportation, create a multimodal transportation system that promotes connectivity between places and functions and spearheads positive economic development and community growth. Some feedbacks, additional feedbacks that we receive and additional action includes the complete street approach. We had a lot of discussion on that. And they just wanted to make sure that it doesn't not only go on new development, but also on redevelopment projects. And also there was talk about state road projects, development on state roads, that we need to make sure that the county advocates with the state to make sure that more development are better designed in Baltimore County. And just to have that coordination between county and state when we do those projects. So we talked about the sidewalks, needs for more sidewalks. They will talk about that some neighborhoods do actually take sidewalks away, and they wanted to know that when we do widen, streets, just to make sure that we have sidewalks, how do we deal with private properties? And they want to make sure that there's no effects. The effect of private properties to build sidewalks and implement bike lane. What will those effects be? Remedies for properties in flood zones. They want to make sure that we make it more accessible to enter the park system. And also there was some talk about the bike share programs and have some type of incentives to get bicycle to more people that are not able to get one. There were also some talk about having incentives for e-bikes for alternative mode of transportation, and also incentives for electric charging stations. And they will talk about having parking around green spaces, because right now, for example, Lake Roland and Patapsco State Park do have some parking issues. Incentivize also people to drive less and reduce those parking spots and reclaim them to open space. and reuse of vacant and shopping centers were also of discussion. They just wanted to make sure that the vacant can be reused for designs and development that are more diverse and inclusive. And also talk about mass transportation. They said that all mass transportation should have bike racks. On the goal, infrastructure goals, align infrastructure investment with growth and redevelopment efforts, utilizing green technology and sustainable building practices. They were generally agreed, they generally agreed with this goal and all the actions supporting this goal. And some of the feedbacks, there was a lot of talk about incorporating engineer rain gardens in the design and include something like native vegetation and reduce also use of ornamental pesticides in designs. And they also say that new development and redevelopment standards should incorporate certain amount of public open space and have access to community gardens. They will also talk about incentivizing commercial spaces and properties to do more green practices. We had a lot of talk on open space waiver. They usually do not agree with the open space waiver. They think that the county should not actually accept this approach because maybe the fees are too small and we should make the fee significant enough to make sure that there is a benefit analysis when they want to go with this open space waiver. There was some talk about the adequacy analysis. They said that when we do this type of analysis that the county ignore rainfall and that we should also put in place some type of regulations regarding packaging to control trash. Also talk about moving from suburban to urban atmosphere. For community facilities, the goal was to develop facilities to meet the community's need for education, recreation, and safety that are inviting, accessible and adaptable, and constructed using contemporary sustainable green building practices. They agree with this goal and also with all the actions that support the goal. And for additional feedback, we talked about the Towson being the main headquarters where everybody go to Towson for everything, and they would like to see more substations in the county so that there's no always, they don't always have to go to Towson to process everything. And also they will talk about having more inclusion of other language and ethnicity in all county facilities to make sure that everybody can access it. Also incorporate free spaces for community associations and residents to meet. There were examples of the library where sometimes that's where community associations meet, but there is some type of fee involved. Also incorporating solar in all existing and future county properties and also on some commercial properties. They will also talk about the county should require a percentage of development or redevelopment projects to be solar. And there were discussions on the lighting in the evening to limit the lighting or maybe require certain types of lighting, not only to prevent pollution, but also, for example, the dark skies can also help animals navigate at night. And that's it for us.
Okay, Austin and April.
I'm gonna share your screen. Austin, are you talking?
Is Austin presenting?
Yeah,
Okay, is he muted?
I think so.
There we go.
There we go. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, great. So for transportation, the sentiment was that if we're going to densify corridors to enable that transit-oriented development, that's only going to add to the overcrowding in schools, and we need to focus on the balance of beds and desks and that sort of thing. So we need to meet the needs of the present before focusing on what this future landscape looks like.
I'm sorry,
far as-
Austin. There's
Yeah.
some comments asking if you could enlarge the document, please.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
So for transportation, we need to focus on just the worry that densifying these transit corridors would only worsen the overdevelopment that's already occurring. So before focusing on this future landscape, we need to properly manage the current one. I'll move on to infrastructure. I think everybody in our group agreed with the goals and the content. The goals just needed to be reworked in terms of language, like more specificity, more measurable. For instance, like how are we defining vulnerable right here? What is green infrastructure? What is the outcome of an assessment and regarding just things like that? Like it includes an assessment of the impacts of climate change. What happens after that? What's the purpose of the assessment? What's the outcome? So a lot of agreement with the content and stuff. We just need to focus on our language to make sure that we're going one step further. And then for community facilities, a lot of focus on transparency in the process and making sure that we're applying transparency wherever we can, and to kind of dispel the notion that there's any sort of backroom dealing happening or anything like that. And the idea that community engagement is a matter of information that needs to get out to the community, making sure that the community can access that information. So if we're just focusing on one way of doing that, we're missing a large segment of the population. And community engagement, transparency can look different depending on the population that you're trying to reach. All right.
Okay, David?
Hey y'all, I'll share my screen. Really quick, thanks to my group. We had a really fun time, a lot of familiar faces, and we got some of our planning board members in and were able to give some good comments. So what I've got here, as you can see, our workup with just a few of the ones we talked about a little bit more highlighted that I'd like to share with everyone. And if I miss anything from my group that they felt was really important, I apologize in advance. Please forgive me, but I think I've got some good topics here. One with the transportation objective, we noted that on top of economic development and community growth, we should highlight that transportation can be used as a poverty reduction tool. So I felt like that was a good thing that we could put at the end of this goal and change the language up a little bit. Additionally, we were talking about parking minimums and said that we shouldn't just reduce them across the board, but make sure that they're an incentive to lead to better design and smarter land use. So scooting on along here. we talked about TODs, of course, they've been a controversial subject in parts of the county. So the main thing was that TODs should be a rezoning process and should be done through that instead of being forced through with PUDs. And then I really like this. We kept saying that bike lanes can't just be for people wearing spandex who are comfortable with 60-mile-an-hour cars going next to them. They really have to be for everybody of all ages and safety concern levels, and then skill level as well. It was revealed that I do not know how to ride a bicycle, so this is dear to my heart. Moving right along, with the infrastructure, one of the topics was we were concerned that though in other counties infrastructure planning goes into the master plan, and then from there, I'm getting comments that's never too late to learn to ride a bicycle, so thank you for those. Though it's never too goodness. In other jurisdictions, the master planning process uses the infrastructure to guide development plans guide infrastructure. This hasn't seemed to happen in the past in Baltimore County, and we really need to prioritize that this go around. And then additionally, I like this a lot. At CCPC, they've had a lot of success with these covered parking with solar panels that some of you may have seen. And our group felt this is a big win-win. You get both your car is covered from the rain, and then you get free electricity. Of course, not at the same time, but it's a great program. Moving along, we talked about this one a little bit more. This was a main topic of concern for our group, that though it is always great to replace facilities and have new funding, it is important for existing uses to not be ignored when creating new developments. So the way we said that was that existing developments have existing uses and new developments need to maintain those. So if studios have previously been used, or if rec facilities have previously been used for arts needs, and then they're rebuilt so that they're really just sports facilities, those that benefited from those arts and culture really end up missing out. So I think that's really all we had, the main points. Once again, thank you to my group. I thought we had a really nice discussion. Thanks, y'all.
Great, thank you. Megan, did you want to go?
Sure. Let me share my screen. So our group focused on, most of our comments fell in transportation. And so the first action there regarding expanding the bicycle use, there were several comments about the need to, that was pretty broad, and there were some suggestions of ways to narrow that down, target it more, perhaps focusing around universities and connecting those to the community. Also, a lot of talk regarding number 2, the eliminating the parking minimums. It's worked well in Towson, could work well along our other commercial corridors, and discussion of how it's really the uses that drive the amount of parking that's needed, and some discussion about how flexibility for uses, including temporary uses when developing, would be beneficial in this action as well. Establishing the Safe Walk to School initiative, also a comment regarding considering adding bike paths to school as well. Expanding the bus and shuttle service, comments there surrounding the existing services in place can be a bit confusing, so maybe some improvements needed there. For transit-oriented development, kind of a comment regarding giving a vision of what that looks like. It's not necessarily what folks always say, so building that up to provide a little more background and information. For the complete streets approach to all development projects, make sure to include redevelopment in there as well. And this might fit up above in one of the actions, but just highlighting the need to improve intra-county connections between population centers for transportation. Moving down to infrastructure. So on the action number 2 about low impact development standards, a comment that these are a bit difficult to regulate and perhaps increase incentives to motivate the actions here. A comment regarding solar, to invest in solar on county properties and include incentives for the private sector to do the same. Additional action items to consider developing a more accessible system so that communities can more easily see what projects are happening and the issues that are going on in their communities. And investigating the redevelopment of underutilized shopping centers with affordable housing options and connecting those to transit options. So maybe this belongs in the housing sector, section, but we wanted to make sure that we included that. And making the process easier to build affordable housing, including education about what that really means and considering safety and affordability as well. And then down to community facilities, making sure the process is open and transparent, the community input for development, and we also wanted to include programming at the facilities. And a comment here that it would be helpful to incorporate open space amenities off-site, but within the community that the community wants. So for instance, park improvements, etc., within the community where the development is happening rather than requiring an on-site amenity or paying the fee. And again, just including in addition to the LEED silver standards, also including any indoor air quality standards in facilities and general support for the actions and goal here, and a couple of additional comments under each of the actions. That's it from us.
Bill?
Okay. So let me share my screen real quick. There we go. You got that, Jen? So all in all, the group generally agreed with all of the goals and actions, but similar to what some others have said, there were some that need a little bit more detail, a little bit more explanation on some of the actions. I tried to answer some of the questions they had, but there were even a few actions in here that I really wasn't quite sure where the action was going or how it was going to happen. Just generally not quite sure how to fully answer the question. So there were just some things that need a little bit more detail on kind of what it was talking about. But kind of looking at the first, looking at transportation under action number 1, there were comments that bike paths or pedestrian paths are really not interconnected, and it's difficult to kind of figure out or know how to get from place to place using those types of paths. So there was a suggestion of possibly creating some type of countywide map of bike and ped paths, just so everybody knows how everything is connected, possibly even looking at how things are connected to the city and some of the surrounding counties. Also a comment of considering the creation of road connections for bike ped paths that are exclusive and not, so they're not used for automobiles. For action number 7, there was a comment of also looking to invest in electric bikes and bike share systems. And another kind of theme that came up throughout all of these goals was how to incentivize a lot of these actions. So there was a new action for the first goal, or looking for ways to incentivize the types of transportation systems outlined in the goal and throughout all the other goals. So how do we incentivize what we're trying to achieve? Dropping down to infrastructure. This one, they just wanted to make sure that there was more renewable energy infrastructure and it was just not limited to solar. For action number 1, wanted to ensure that they added pervious surfaces, and again, some type of tax incentives for solar on rooftops and using solar in parking lots, kind of similar to what they've done at the IKEA parking lot. I think it was also mentioned just to kind of clarify the development or redevelopment throughout. If there won't be incentive, will there be incentives to support this action? If not, incentives should be created. Action number 5, this one, we talked about this one a lot. We're just really kind of not sure how this would work and who's responsible, what types of policies and systems. It just really needs a lot more detail on how action item number 5 was going to occur. There was a new action they wanted to add. So action number 7, and developing more of a robust street tree policy. So having better street cover, especially in urban parts of the county. And then last, and under community facilities, under action number 1, how will the evaluation of the county's ever-changing needs going to be conducted and evaluated? Again, that idea of just a little bit more explanation. So explaining open and transparent, how a meeting is going to be advertised and shared with communities. Some folks had a hard time really knowing that these meetings were occurring. They found out kind of more at the last minute. So looking at ways to kind of broaden our reach and into the communities and get them informed sooner than later. Action number 4, everybody thought that there should be broadband access throughout the entire county, not just within county facilities. And action number 6, when possible, prioritize locating near public transit. That's all I have.
Thanks, Bill. Laurie?
Okay. So I will wrap this up here. Crystal, could you enlarge it just a little bit, please? That's good. So for the transportation section, the goal was generally agreed with, although they wanted to add an environmental aspect to the goal. And they wanted to reiterate the support that equity is an important aspect of this goal, but that safety is also a key component. Regarding action number 1, they agreed with the action and wanted to evaluate roads needing bike lanes. Separated bike lanes should be considered as a safer alternative. For the Safe Walk to Schools initiative, they wanted to provide safety elements, sidewalks, lights, more frequent evaluation of bus stops for schools as populations changed. School parking lots were out of date, and to be successful, they needed to be evaluated more frequently to provide safety for students who are walking. And then also address ADA compliance and consider a safe bike to school initiative as well. For expanding shuttle service, wanted to add language that would explore ride programs for areas with food deserts to give access to supermarkets and retail. For TOD, wanted to add public transit is lacking in Baltimore overall. It should not be just limited to buses and shuttles, needs expansion and upgrade of the light rail and the subway system. And then we had some items that were also added. Wanted to decrease vehicle-centric lifestyle, promote the use of trails and bike lanes, behavioral changes, looking at the 15-minute mini city concept, which we looked at in the land use section also. Consider autonomous shuttle system for high traffic routes. Employer promotion of transit use routes to work requires safe and reliable service. Explore safe initiatives for traffic calming. Community input is needed on a case-by-case basis as what is acceptable to the community. And maintenance is also important. Public murals to slow down traffic, crosswalks alternatives needed, public buildings with high pedestrian use. And moving to the infrastructure section, they definitely agreed with the goal and wanted to add need to address climate change and how to mitigate and adapt moving forward within that goal language. The group basically felt that all of the actions supported the goal and supported the idea that climate change was kind of, in essence, the reason for all of these actions being needed. So regarding action number 1, flooding and stormwater is a countywide problem, not just in vulnerable communities. So the group wanted to clarify that. Under action number 5, grinder pump sewage goes back into local waterways and look at the system that addresses the broader problem. So while septic systems should be looked at, there are other systems that replace them that are just as damaging in different ways. So they thought the entire problem should be broadened, the scope of the problem should be broadened for evaluation. Let's see, we added some actions. Number 7, programs for young people to educate them on climate change, apprenticeships and internships, employment and training, partnership with the school system. Expand the county tree canopy, create and replace sidewalks with permeable surfaces, put a hold on more dense development in the DR 5.5 zoning district until infrastructure can catch up with it. Review of waste management system, safe water drinking levels, etc. Community garden for the homeless, and look at infrastructure for community laundry facility also for the homeless. I don't think we got to the third. Did we do the third one, Crystal? Oh, well.
Sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened.
That's okay. So last but not least, we had the community facilities section, and everyone basically agreed with the goal and the actions that were listed, but wanted to clarify and add some actions. So for number 8, county facilities need to have better access for all community members. Senior centers and schools could be used for other community functions if allowable. This action also was pertinent to the Healthy Communities Work Group because the group members felt that scheduling time in county buildings was often difficult, and so that programmatic aspect will be dealt with in the Healthy Communities Work section. They wanted to, number 9, use community facility investment to leverage other development or investment. Number 10, the county can pursue federal grants to improve telecommunications at the federal level. Number 11, facilities and maintenance and sustainability agreements for buildings. Deferred maintenance is a major problem, and regular maintenance could defer replacement and prevent demolition of the building. And finally, county office buildings need to be checked regarding safe drinking water, air quality, etc. So that was it for our group.
All right. So I just want to thank everyone who joined us tonight. I know that many of you have been with us for other evenings, and we still have another meeting this Wednesday and then 2 more meetings after that. I just want to remind you to go to the baltimorecounty.md.gov/masterplan 2030 to take the survey for the goals and actions that we went through tonight. And if you need to go back and look at those goals and actions, those are posted online as well. And when we get the meeting recording, we will post that as well as this PDF of the presentation. So with that, I thank you all for coming. And again, feel free to reach out if you have any other ideas that you would like to pass along. We'll be happy to hear them. So thank you and have a nice evening.
Good job, planning department.
Thank you.
Thank you, group.